This is another archival upload of some of my previous mix critique videos. I apologize for the vertical format that this video is about to switch to. This is 341 to 345. This mix was sent in by John.
Big booty, big booty, big booty, big booty, big booty, big booty, big.
All right, I mean, the mix sounds good, so like, pretty good job there. I have a note that I'll get to in a second, but like, dude, what the fuck is this song? Oh man. All right. So far, really the only note that I have on the mix itself is the vocals don't really feel like they fit with everything else. I would probably compress the vocals a little bit more, maybe do a little bit more EQ carving to make it like feel a little bit more polished. But right now the vocals are kind of sticking out. They feel like they don't fit with the rest of the sound of the track.
Big booty.
Yeah, man, I mean, honestly, the mix overall sounds really good. Like, you did a really good job. The biggest thing for me is just the vocals. They're sticking out. They don't feel like they belong. So a little bit more compression, probably some more EQ, maybe some saturation would help even more. Other than that, it's a solid mix, but like, dude, what is this song? This mix was sent in by Cordell. You specifically asked about it feeling muddy and lifeless, and it absolutely feels muddy and lifeless. The reason for that is you did a smiley face EQ. There's a good amount of low end, there's a good amount of like upper mids, you gutted the mid range. Everything from like 500 hertz to like 2K is just not present in the mix. That's where you get the fullness of the mix. Without that mid-range there, it's not gonna sound good no matter what you do. So you clearly over EQ'd stuff. Like, you'd probably be better just turning off all of the EQ and just work on the fader balance. I cannot stress this enough. I see this in so many of these mixes that people send in. You guys start processing way too early and you end up ruining your tracks because of it. You need to spend more time getting a balance with just the faders before you touch a single plugin. Seriously, like, that is the greatest mix tip that I can give you, is to just spend more time balancing the faders. Don't open a single fucking plugin. When you've reached a spot where moving faders is no longer improving things, that's when you start adding plugins. Spend more time balancing the faders. Spend more time listening to the raw tracks in relation to each other. If you listen to nothing else from me, that is the tip that is going to make your mixes better. This mix was sent in by Frank. I mean, so far, most of the tones sound okay. None of it feels like it's blending together. The guitars feel a little too far out front. The drums feel okay. They seem like they're probably in a reasonable spot compared to the drums in terms of like the overall volume. But there's a big disconnect between the guitar and the bass, and that's kind of what's making everything feel a little bit weird right now, I think. Like, you need to keep in mind, drums are gonna be a lot of low end and a lot of high end information and not very much in the middle. Guitar is gonna be a whole lot of mid-range information, all the way from like 100 hertz all the way up to like 10K. And then the bass is going to give you everything from like 50 and maybe even a little below all the way up to like 4K. So the bass and the guitar are occupying a lot of the same frequencies in the frequency spectrum. So when they don't feel like they're blending together very well, especially when the only elements in the mix right now are the drums, the bass, and the guitar, the whole thing feels really disconnected. That's one thing that people don't seem to think about in metal, is how important the bass tone is. And I think honestly, of all the tones you have here, the bass tone probably could have been dialed in a little bit better. But also just EQ wise, it feels like you've probably high passed the guitar a little bit too much. Feels like you've probably low passed the bass too much and maybe cut a little too much out of the mid range of the bass. But also I feel like the bass is probably just a little too low in volume. I think that needs to come up a little bit more to blend better with the guitar. This mix was sent in by Dante. I mean, Honestly, so far it feels a little dark overall. Honestly, part of that is I think the guitars are actually a little bit too low in the mix compared to everything else. I feel like the balance between the bass and the drums is really, really good, so I don't want you to mess with that. But I think overall the reason it feels so dark is that the bass is too loud compared to the guitar, so I think you really should just bring the guitars up in volume. I feel like that's going to help a lot, but you also might need to boost a little bit of upper mids in the guitars. I would try just turning the fader up first. If we still don't have enough of that upper mid bite that you generally want in a track like this, you might have to boost the high mids in the guitars a little bit. Yeah, man, I mean, overall, the individual tones of everything sound pretty good. It just doesn't feel like they're blending together well. That's going to be mostly a balance thing. So bring those guitars up. That's going to help a lot. Again, you might need a little bit more upper mids in the guitars depending on how it sounds after you raise the volume of that. You might also need a little bit more mix bus compression. But other than that, you're also going to want some volume automation in here for sure. Because a lot of the downbeats in this section especially don't feel like they're hitting as hard as they could. And that could be really improved with just a little bit of automation. This mix was sent in by Adam. All right, the intro's a little harsh. You got a little too much of that, like 2 to 5K region, probably right around 3K. It's getting a little painful. Feels like you're missing a lot of low mids and you definitely have too much high mids going on. Everything's a little top end heavy. It's starting to get a little harsh in places. It feels like the guitar has been high passed up to like at least 500 hertz. The bass, it feels like you gutted everything around the like 2 to 500 hertz range. Like it feels like you're missing a lot of low mids here. Yeah, man, overall, it's kind of smiley face EQ'd. It's not as bad as some that we've had in the past, but you have like a good amount of low end. Below 200 hertz is pretty solid. Then you have okay top end, but you also have a really heavy concentration in the upper mids. Again, like the 2 to 5K range is just really overpowering. And then everything in between those, everything from like 200 hertz up to like 2K just feels like it's lacking a lot. And that's where a lot of the fullness of the track really comes from. Honestly, if you brought the high mids down a bit, it probably wouldn't be too bad. I think where the low end is in relation to most of the mid-range is probably okay. It might be a little over the top, but it's probably mostly all right. But it's really hard to tell with how much you've boosted the upper mids. You got to back those upper mids down